there are many genres in the music world. Death metal has to be one of the darkest of all. Reason for that is just the generic thoughts of basic Satanism, sacrificing, just very negative things. And there's so many just things that contribute to making death metal more than just the generic thoughts. And I'm going to get into that, but let's first start at the beginning. So in my research, I've discovered that the first death metal group was called Venom. They were from Newcastle, England, one of the great metal circles in the world. That's where we get Judas Priest, Motorhead, Iron Maiden, groups like that. But instead of doing the traditional kind of like heavy metal kind of thing, they went a step further in doing very thrashy, or also known as very intense guitar riffs, like and then just explosiveness of a good show. Their first album, called Welcome to Hell, was put out in 1981, and one of the songs was called black metal, and that's another term that death metal is categorized in, and is even a subgenre of death metal. Going into the writing processes of that, Venom talked about just social injustice, personal issues, politics, just a bunch of basic stuff that normally other groups of different genres would normally talk about. And so when they blew up, you have other countries surrounding in Europe and even the United States doing that same thing. One band in particular that really stepped up and brought death metal to a new level was called Dark Throne. They're from Norway, and at the time Norway was being pushed into Christianity. And of course the guys like Dark Throne weren't too good or too happy with being pushed into religion. So they decided to say, hey, let's go against this, kind of like a punk kind of thing where it's just rebellious. And so they talked about Satan and sacrificing. And that's generally where people get that death metal idea from. And so that, along with Venom and having very fast-paced music, you had Dark Throne having darker imagery, which then contributed to all these other bands that would come in later in the years, apply that to their music. The first wave of death metal in America started in Florida, specifically in Tampa area. There's this recording studio called Morrisound. That's where most bands called Death, Morbid Angel, Obituary, Cannibal Corpse, that's where they got huge. And that's where the whole idea of horrific imagery from horror movies, horror stories, and eventually cultural stories, whether that be from a different country or even just from a family point of view. That's how that, and then we have this, again, composing of music where we have very fast guitar riffs, bass riffs, and then just very fast drum beats. Including that, that's basically, I feel like, is a little too much for people. And I can totally understand that. At first, that wasn't for me. But as I've learned to branch out into death metal and then those subgenres, I've seen, I've grown to like it. And so, there's two types of people I've noticed that like just metal or hard rock in general, where you're very chill and you're very accepting of normal things and you're pretty okay to adapting. I feel like those kind of people are the best to kind of listen to death metal because you can appreciate it bits by bits, at least in my view. And then another type of person is when you're very attentive, you want something to be in a certain way, or you don't like change. And to me, seeing from that point of view all the intensity of the guitars and the drums, that's where people get a little uncomfortable. And so, to me, when I'm speaking to those kind of laid-back people, I say, hey, you listen to rap and pop. People that talk about social issues, personal stories. That's no different from metal and hard rock. because they talked about it in the same way, they just composed it in a different way. Not as happy or dancey. So if you are one of those people, I strongly suggest you give death metal a try, or at least look at some of the subgenres of it. Because there are good things out there, you just kind of have to find what's good for you.